Hey guys, welcome back. Now today we're continuing our journey of discovery, comparing Logic Pro X to Ableton Live. Now so far what we've done is we've recorded some audio, we've recorded some MIDI, and we've done some audio editing. Now today we're going to be focusing on the use of audio effects plugins, how to insert them and how to edit them in both platforms. Now this is a really important part of the creative process, and by simply applying the right plugins you can transform your track into something quite special. Now I'd just like to thank you guys so much for the comments that have been coming in. In particular, I'd like to draw on a couple. First of all, PG, who dropped a nice comment regarding the last video where I was messing with the warp modes in Ableton and flex time in Logic. He pointed out that in Ableton you have different warp modes or algorithms which will be suited to different types of recordings. If you're warping drums, you might use a particular algorithm for that, as opposed to something maybe a bit more musical such as a bass guitar or a voice. And that's a really important point which I missed in the last video, and now I have a better awareness of that. So thank you so much for that, PG. Now Colin made a fantastic suggestion. He suggested that whenever you record an audio clip into Ableton, it's a good idea to make a duplicate copy of that clip into another cell before you start editing, because if you mess things up, you've got something to fall back on. Now that's an excellent idea and I'll definitely be using that one. So thank you so much, Colin, for that bit of knowledge. Anyway guys, please keep your questions, suggestions and comments coming in, because we can all learn from one another, and that's the whole point of this series. Anyway, let's get into today's video. Hope you enjoy it. Okay, so we're back here in Ableton Live. The audio effects options are amazing. They are fantastic and very, very flexible. The way in which you can manipulate them, place them in terms of the routing and control them are actually, I think, quite unique. I could be wrong, but just having spent this short time developing an understanding of how they work, I'm actually really, really impressed, and I can see why this tool can be such a powerful instrument in the live setting. So I'm going to try and avoid getting into a 2-hour video and keep it really concise and just kind of show you where the audio effects are, what options you have just generally, how to place them and how to do some basic adjustments and tweaking. So just to remind you of where we got so far, just play this back a little bit. Okay, that's cool. So I think the first thing I want to do is show you where to access your audio effects. So over here in the categories column, you can see audio effects. You click on that and you have a whole range of effects options right here. You can click the little down arrows like so, and within that you've got your presets. So let's say, for example, on the amp, I'm going to use bass roundup on my bass guitar. Let's rename this bass guitar track now. So I'm going to right click on the actual track title and I'm going to come down to rename. The other way of doing this, I'm going to do this to the clip, is to right click again. You'll see over here the shortcuts, the keyboard shortcuts or key commands. So I'm actually going to use this shortcut, which is Command R. Okay, so I'm going to start off with placing an amp onto my bass guitar track. So I come over here, click on amp and look through the different presets, and right here I can see bass roundup. So I'm using this one. Now there are a number of ways of actually getting your effects plugin onto your track. My first method, click, hold, drag and drop onto the track. And as you hover over the track, you will see this space down here appear. We come down to the bottom and release, and here's our bass amp plugin. So if you remember from before, we used a tuner to tune up the bass guitar, and that was the tuner plugin that we dropped in earlier. We don't need it anymore, so to select it, you click on the top title bar and you just backspace or delete. Now we've got our bass amp, and let's have a quick listen, see how it sounds. In fact, let's bypass first of all and then switch it on. Yep, definitely straight away you can hear a definite sound. It's rounding up the bass, making it sound pretty much like a processed bass sound. In fact, let's hear that in with the music. Of course, you can go through and you can mess with all of the controls and tune it to exactly how you want it to sound. Next thing I want to do is I want to add a cabinet. Okay, so a bass cab. Let's go for something like the 4x10 bass cab. So once again, I could either come over here, drag it and drop it onto the bass track, or I can bring it directly into the space, seeing as this section is now open. There's our cabinet. And within this, there are different options. I can actually choose between all of these options. We can switch our microphone to on axis, off axis, far, condenser or dynamic microphone. And you know, the controls are pretty good. Again, I'm not going to spend too much time messing with this because it's going to take up the whole of the tutorial trying to get it sounding right. The idea for this video is to show you how to actually access and implement effects. So I've got those two going on, and I've thought to myself, hey, you know what, maybe I should use a compressor. So I'm going to stick a compressor in, but maybe I want to drop it in before the bass amp. In the list, look for compressors, and there's our compressor. Open that up. I'm just going to go for the classical compressor and drag this down. I'm just going to drop it here for now, so we can actually see the compressor type. It's got all of the usual suspects, all of the controls, ratio, attack, release. The threshold control is actually this one right here. So that's how you adjust your threshold. You've got your side chaining, and there's a filter as well that you can use, which is pretty neat actually. And the makeup gain is a switch, an automatic switch rather than a dial-in control. I've got the compressor here. Let's say I want to reposition it though. Click on the title bar, drag and drop to any position you like. Now, in terms of the signal flow, we've got compressor, bass amp, and cab. Okay, so let's move on to looking at the drums. So I'm going to click on the drum track, and right now we can see the parameters just being displayed for the drum pad that's been selected, or drum sample that's selected. So at the moment it's the kick drum. If we were to click on the tom, you'd see the sample and the parameter set up for the high tom. Let's go back to the kick, and we're going to solo this and just have a quick listen to that. Now we can solo even further by clicking on the kick itself, soloing the kick. Okay, release that. This 606 kit has actually got effects plugins already installed. Just down here you can see a glue compressor, you can see an EQ8, which is the equalizer. Let's say, for example, I think what I'll use is something really obvious. Let's say I wanted to just add a reverb to this overall drum kit. It's a bit crazy, but we're going to do that. So I'll make sure that this is all the way down. And I'm going to grab my reverb, drums room. Let's try that one. Grab that, drag, and I can drop it just here. And now that's going to have an impact on everything. Let's play that back. Okay, just using the wet dry control. Okay, cool. Now let's say, for example, however, that I didn't want to be affecting that entire drum kit. If I grab it and I drag it just here, just after or even before the EQ, let's drop it in here. Okay, and now it's only affecting the kick drum. See, everything else is dry. So what's great about this is you can actually reposition your effects to exactly how you want to have them routed from one to the next. I think working from left to right, that's the flow of the signal. Of course, I don't want that reverb there, so I'm just going to select and delete that. And I'm just going to scroll back this way. I'm going to double click this title bar just to crunch these down. And this here is your macro control, but we'll touch on that another time. Okay, so I'm just going to do a couple more things before I switch over to Logic. Now I want to be able to close this area down here, this section of the screen. And if I was to come down here with the mouse, I can click this button and it closes or opens it. One of the things I've found over the years is keyboard commands, keyboard shortcuts are just such a time saver. So the keyboard shortcut for this, to open and close this section, is Command Option L. I want to go to the Juno pad. Let's solo that. Cool. Let's open the effects area. Now I want to just grab this filter delay, drag and drop over here. Let's have a quick listen. Okay, cool, lovely. If I wanted to change, now I've just dragged the whole filter delay folder over. If I wanted to go like this, open up the down arrow, what I can do is I can go through, I can delete this right here, and I can just drag, let's say, let's go this one here, drag this one instead. Right. Now another way of doing this is just right here. If I was to click on this hot swap preset button, you can see up here in the effects section that we've got hop swapping audio effect is now active, it seems. So I can now double click on this effect and let's try this one, Complex 5. I can now hot swap to another preset, such as Complex 5, or let's say short. So hot swapping actually makes life a lot easier, and the keyboard shortcut for toggling the hot swap option is Q. So there you go, quite handy. Okay, so now we're back in Logic. Just like Ableton, Logic has got some amazing audio effects plugin options. Say, for example, you load up a synth, a drum kit, you create a new track for a bass guitar or a guitar. Logic loads preset audio effects plugins with that instrument. So let's create an empty channel strip. Now let's pick something like the elastic lead. Okay, so you've got the ES2 synthesizer right here. Okay, and then you've got an EQ plugin, a channel EQ, but that's bypassed at the moment. But you've got an ensemble and a stereo delay loaded as well at the same time. So that sounds okay. So these have come in as presets. It's also sending some of the signal through to bus 1, where there's a reverb and an EQ. Okay, so this is pretty cool. Ableton does the same thing as well. So let's delete this track, close the library window, which is Y on the keyboard, and we're back to here. Now, if you remember when we created the track to record the bass, let's create a new guitar or bass. You can see right here, by creating that, we've got presets loaded on the channel strip, which you can choose from. Okay, so delete that. Now the effects that were installed on the original bass line are, there's a bass amp right here which we can open up, and you can go in and you can actually position where you want your microphone in terms of whether it's on axis or off, away from the speaker or close to the speaker. You can also mix between DI or the amp. You can do the slider between the two. You can change the microphone from a dynamic Sennheiser 421 or a Neumann 87. Okay, so you've got options there. You've got different sort of amp options you can choose as well. Okay, or you can customize and you can go, you know, there's a great deal of options before you even go in and start messing with the actual controls. So you've got a hell of a lot of options here. You could even change the cabinet size, and you know, just like in Ableton, again, maybe there is a bit more control here. So yeah, the amps and stuff are fantastic in Logic. So let's start with the piano, the grand piano. Let's solo that. Okay, at the moment we've got the piano going through a couple of buses. I'm going to mute those 2 buses, the sends on those 2 buses, and let's have a quick listen. Okay, I'm actually going to put a reverb directly onto the track itself. So to do that, I'm going to click here, just underneath these slots here. So these are our effects plugins or processors. Just click in this slot right here, and now we can see the effects options, and we scroll down and we've got quite a few options here. These are the most recent ones used, and these are the sort of headline categories. You've got delays, you've got different types of delays here, and you've got distortion, multi-effects. What I'm going to go for is I'm going to go for reverb, and I'm going to go for the Space Designer reverb. And now this is our reverb unit. Nice big display and lots of control. In terms of presets, there are so many options. If I was to click this down arrow, we've got this category right here, and then there's a subcategory, and then there's loads and loads of options, and this is just large spaces. Okay, so many fantastic options that you can choose from. So let's say a hall. I'm just going to pick something at random, large hall. So we've got our slots here, and we've got a reverb, and if you see just below that reverb, we've got another slot right here, so we can click and hold, and we can insert something else there if we wanted to. If I wanted to get rid of this, what I need to do, unlike Ableton where you select the effect and then press delete, you hover over the slot and you come to the right corner and click there, and you go no plugin. If, however, I wanted to listen to the instrument with a particular effect plugin muted, you hover over it again and you click this, and that will mute the plugin. Switch it back on, or you can open it up by clicking once, and then you can select the bypass switch up here in the corner. Okay, again, the thing I like about the Logic plugins is the display, nice and big, and you can see a lot of the detail. That's one of the areas that I'm so accustomed to with Logic that I found a little bit of a challenge working with the small displays on the effects plugins on Ableton, but at the same time the Ableton plugins do a fantastic job, so I'm getting used to that. Okay, so let's come back to our drums. A nice feature that Logic has, which is called track stacking, and you can group preferably like instruments, so maybe all your drums, you can group them together into what's called a track stack. Now to do that, you select tracks that you want to include in your track stack or folder. So I'm going to click here on the first track, hold down the shift key, and then just click through to select all of my tracks. So I want all of these drum tracks in my track stack. Now you can use the key command, Command Shift D, and you get this window, and you have 2 options. You can choose a folder stack or a summing stack, and down here is a description as to what each one does or the purpose of each one. Summing stack is the one I generally go for, so I'm going to hit create right now, and now we've got here our track stack. If I was to close this, you'll see that right here we've got sum 4, and inside this we've got all of our tracks. Now that's quite handy. Let's just rename this, double click there and call it drums. And having done that, the folder is automatically renamed to drums. Cool. So here, we've got all of our drums in here, and we can actually apply effects plugins to each of these individual drums. So in fact, we haven't titled these. So what I'm going to do now to rename this track, there are a couple of ways. You can double click, or you can do shift return. And I'm going to type Tom there. And as you can see, I've renamed the track, but the region hasn't been renamed. I could select the region, come up here and rename it as Tom, or I can click on the track, hold down the key command, Shift Option N, and automatically rename the region. which is quite handy because if you've got long titles, it saves you having to type it all up again. So what I'm going to do, just go through and rename all of these parts, and I'll come right back. Okay, so I've renamed all of the parts, and what I'm going to do is just quickly show you how effective that last key command was. So Shift Option N, move down, Shift Option N, down, Shift Option N. Okay, so quickly I've now renamed all of my regions. And if, for example, I had regions coming along here, as long as I've got them selected, Shift Option N, and everything will be renamed that I want to have renamed, that is. Okay, so quite a handy key command. Now, just like in Ableton, I have the option of applying audio effects plugins to the overall drum kit right here. So I've got the drums selected, and if I was to put something on here, for example, let's put a reverb on. Again, that's quite a good way of demonstrating this. So let's play this back. Okay, so as you can hear, all of the drums are affected. That's because it's actually on the track stack position. Okay, so now I can, of course, place the reverb onto the kick drum on its own, and let's go in there and okay. So in terms of routing and positioning and placement, you have that flexibility once you created a track stack. Now I want to, however, insert a compressor onto my kick drum to start off with. So load up the compressor, and I'm going to choose this one here. This one, my favorites, the classic VCA, which is a modeling of the DBX 160. You've really got to check out my video on Logic's classic compressor types. They are fantastic, and there'll be a link on the screen where you can check that out. But anyway, what I'm going to do, let's just do a quick bit of tuning of this. Going to add some soft distortion. Okay, so instantly you're hearing the effect, you're hearing things come to life by just doing one or two tweaks. Now you've got, I go into more detail in my other video, you really ought to check it out, about the different compressor types and how you might want to use them in your track or project. And of course, I can stack more and more effects plugins on the same track. So there's an EQ right there, and this EQ is fantastic. You've got a nice spectrum analyzer right here. You switch on and off, and the controls are brilliant, very comprehensive. Okay, so I mean, there's no point going through this whole process with all of the instruments because the process is exactly the same. Inserting effects and adjusting effects parameters in Logic is a real doddle. It's absolutely easy peasy. The displays are nice and big, and the information is easy to understand. And you can, like I said, you can group things together in track stacks. Check out my video as well on track stacks if you want to learn more. Okay, so let's leave it there for today. Okay, so I hope you found the video useful. We've covered quite a few things. Now we've still got a number of things to cover, so make sure you stay tuned and remember to share the video if you found it useful. Like, subscribe and comment. It's always great hearing from you. And I'll be back again real soon. I'm Dr. Duce. Peace.